Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ActDefy Connect series. I'm your host, Ellie Wang, and I'm excited to continue this series where we connect with leaders, changemakers, and public servants making an impact in their community. Today, we're honored to be joined by Judge Klump, a United States Magistrate Judge for the Southern District of Indiana. With a unique background in STEM, going to public service, and federal law, Judge Klump has built an impressive career dedicated to serving others and upholding the rule of law. We're excited to learn more about her journey and her work on the federal bench and her advice for students interested in law and public service. I'd love to start by talking about your journey into the legal profession. So, your academic background is actually in physics and mathematics rather than political science or pre-law. What initially drew you towards STEM, and how did you eventually discover your passion for law?
Well, thanks, Ellie, for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, particularly about some of my math and science background, which I put to use more frequently than one might think in my time on the bench. So I think I was always predisposed towards math and science and sort of my inclination to approach problems in a very logical and systematic way. And so I think, again, that already put me and started me on the math and science train early. I think what cemented my path in high school and college was my great high school teachers, frankly, who I just loved my high school math and science teachers, and they really ignited my passion in that area. I went to Georgetown University for undergrad. I was a physics and math major, and there's a lot of pre-med students who tend to be science majors at Georgetown, at least back in the day when I went there. But it's not a huge, science university like MIT or something like that. As a result, at least again, when I went there, for example, the physics department was small and it was pretty intimate. And that was a huge advantage for, a new undergrad coming in. You had so much direct access to the professors and your fellow physics students and just all of the administrative staff, even everyone was there to be very supportive of you. Whether or not they were your actual professor or not, they were there to help. And so it really was like a family environment almost. So that just encouraged me further to stick with math and science.
Yeah,
And so,
that's great to hear. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
did you ask me too about the transition? I'm trying
Yeah,
to.
yeah. So, like, how did you discover that you had a passion for law and eventually lead to what you do today?
Sure. So I always had an interest in law. I was trying to remember. I think it was maybe in college when I was studying math and physics. But when I was in college, you didn't call it internship. I worked as essentially a substitute secretary at a law firm in my hometown during one of the summers in college and it was either that or high school, I can't remember, but I got some exposure to the legal field there. So I've always had some interest. Also, my undergrad was full of people who were interested in law. So there was a lot of conversations in that area there. I took um, a science and public policy class in undergrad, which was all about learning to advocate for science issues on, Capitol Hill or with whoever your representatives are. Actually, would be great for someone like you and your listeners here. So I never had to go on a quote math and science track at the exclusion of my interest in law. So I had that going for me. And then once I graduated from undergrad, I was working in science and engineering, and it became evident to me that, you can only uh, make so much change or achieve so much change as a scientist or engineer without the help of policymakers and um, lawyers, frankly, and being able to have a lot of robust conversations with stakeholders. So that experience, especially like the learning the importance of being able to speak to not just to fellow science and engineers, but to community members, to policymakers, to industry leaders, to environmentalists who may be concerned, or, to the grassroots organizations, the importance of having those conversations really pushed me towards the legal field because lawyers um, develop or should develop skills at bringing groups together and engaging everyone's interests and trying to reach good resolutions to problems. So that's what kind of pivoted me from science and engineering to law.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Especially nowadays when many students kind of feel very pressured to kind of figure their career out very early. So, kind of just piggybacking off of that, what would you say to students who are still exploring different career paths? And, how would you address the current, pressures that students may feel to be kind of committed to a career in high school or very early on?
So I would be very encouraging of individuals exploring different career paths. And I can only speak from my experience, but it's amazing, really, how an experience in one particular career field or one industry can translate to another field. Like for example, when I'm talking with someone about interviewing for a new job, I encourage them to think about the experiences that they've had in all of their jobs, whether or not maybe they worked as a landscaper or something 2 summers ago, and they're now applying to a accounting job or something like that. Think broadly about how your experiences as a landscaper, about the skills and um, the skills, the virtues, whatever it is you developed in that position and the lessons you learned from that position, how they'll translate into what might seem like a completely different field. So, for example, I volunteered on an ambulance in college, and then I worked on a ambulance during the summers and college breaks when I was back home. And that job doesn't seem like it has anything to do with being a magistrate judge or being a lawyer. And I constantly rely, frankly, on the skills I developed as an EMT in my current position. So, for example, communicating with people during difficult times. They're in very stressful situations when you're rolling up in an ambulance on somebody who's experiencing a medical emergency, and often a lot of other stressors besides just the medicals. I like to think, at least, that I learned how to talk to people effectively in those situations, and I bring those communication skills to my current job when I'm working with parties, for example, to resolve a dispute. So litigation doesn't have to continue. And also, um, again, like my own career path shows that I pivoted from science to law. I went to law school about 4 years after I went to undergrad, and I was in law school with people who had also been out for a while. They were doctors. There was, I think, multiple pharmacists. There was somebody who'd been at the Olympics. I mean, there were all kinds of people who had very different um, backgrounds that had really nothing to do, quote unquote, with the legal field. And they brought some of the best conversation and viewpoints to law school. So I would strongly encourage everyone to explore different paths and don't feel like you have to commit when you're, 17 years old, or when you're 27 for that matter, or 37.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So just to jump on to the next question, you attended Georgetown University and then later graduated from the UMich School of Law. So what lessons did you learn across your educational journey that have stayed with you throughout your career?
So I had a great experience at both universities. Georgetown has well, again, that's qualified back in the early 2000s. It had a lot of broad educational requirements, like cross-curriculum requirements. So the students took a year of theology, a year of ethics, philosophy, history, all these different broad curriculum requirements. And sometimes that can be seen daunting as a young student, but I think there's so much value in having a wide lens during your educational journey because uh, I think it's tempting to discount the intersection or the overlap between different fields of study. Kind of touching back on what we've been talking about, Ellie, is, you can pivot from one type of career, one industry to another. You can draw on experiences or lessons or themes you're learning in a literature class when you're talking about a math project that you're going to present. So I took classes on the theology of evolution. I mean, all different mixed mashes of different areas of study. And I think that was an important emphasis at Georgetown, which I've taken with me. And as far as Michigan, it was similar. You were encouraged to take a broad range of classes. And even if, I didn't end up becoming a securities exchange expert, certainly learning about securities laws, regulation has helped me to become a better lawyer, given me a more fulsome background, and given me ideas about how to approach a different area of law, whether that's criminal or employment or what have you. So I just would emphasize the value of taking a vast array of classes and looking for the intersection or the overlap that you might find between different fields of study.
Yeah, it's great to hear. So, kind of just to transition away from the educational aspect and more so what you do on a day-to-day basis. So, what does a typical day as a magistrate judge look like for high school students who may be interested in this career pathway in the future?
Sure. So as a federal magistrate judge, I do a variety of different things. It's different in different districts. I work here in the Southern District of Indiana, which is essentially the southern half of the state. Different magistrate judges may have different responsibilities or different day-to-day uh, um, roles in different districts. But again, here in the Southern District of Indiana, I handle both a criminal docket as well as a civil docket. The criminal docket, I'm on criminal duty for a certain number of weeks per year, not all the time. I rotate with my other judges. During that time, I'm responsible for reviewing applications that would be submitted by the government for a search warrant, for a complaint that would be attached to an arrest warrant, that may be sort of more traditional judge roles that you might think of when you're thinking about a judge. I also, in connection with criminal duty, uh, see the defendant. If an individual is arrested, they're brought into court. That's an important part of their rights. They're brought before a judicial officer. It would be me or one of my colleagues, where they're informed of their charges. A decision is made about whether they're going to be released or detained, whether there's probable cause for the offense that's alleged, things of that nature. So that's a portion of my job is on the criminal side. On the flip side, and the majority of my time is with civil cases. Civil cases are different. That's where you're not fighting about somebody alleged to have committed a crime. Civil cases where one party's seeking to recover money from the other side, or perhaps to get what's called an injunction from the court for certain relief. And my role in those cases is to help manage the cases. So when they're filed or when they're first started in court, I meet with the attorneys on a regular basis to make sure that they're exchanging information. It's called the discovery process, and doing that in accordance with the rules, and doing it efficiently, hopefully, and without disputes, and get the case teed up for trial in as expeditious fashion as possible. I also, on the civil side, do what for example, I did one this morning. I conduct settlement conferences, and those are similar to, you might call it a mediation, where the magistrate judge acts as a neutral or objective mediator and helps bring the parties together and find some sort of mutual agreeable resolution of their dispute so they don't have to continue the litigation, which in some cases can take years and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's an important and satisfying part of my job, is to help bring parties together where possible to get a resolution of their case.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So many of our high schoolers can kind of understand what a magistrate judge does, because many young individuals in high school don't really understand specific, duties that happen every single day, whether it's from legislators towards public servants. So it's great to see your perspective on what you do every single day. So just to help high schoolers some more and to kind of bring more of your insights to high schoolers who are currently viewing this, many of them are interested in law. So, what steps do you think that they could take now to kind of get engaged in the legal field, considering that it's very important for youth to be involved civically and understand how the judicial system works?
Sure. I think there's a number of different ways you can get involved, like as pretty much as early as you want. One, you can always come and observe federal court or your state court. Federal court, the default rule is that proceedings are open. So I always encourage people to come and watch proceedings. You can learn a lot. It can often, sometimes they're dry, sometimes they're pretty entertaining, but regardless, I think you'll learn a lot, and judges are committed, I think now more than ever, to making that the judicial process or the judicial system open and transparent, and they know the value of civic education. So I'm sure my colleagues in this building would encourage people to come observe. So that's one thing. Two, I would, as I did when I was, a kid, was like if you're interested in the legal field, who cares if there's like an actual internship program sponsored by a particular firm? I'm pretty sure this is how I got my summer secretary job back in the day, is I just started writing letters, cold calling, not calling, but cold writing, different big law firms and small law firms that were in my community, and just saying, hey, I'm interested. Like, what can I do? I mean, frankly, does may not matter if you pay me or not. I would like to get involved. I'd like to get exposed. And I know that's how I got one of the positions that I did. It wasn't anything that was advertised on the firm's webpage. I often tell people, it's like, what is the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is someone doesn't respond to your letter, or they don't, or they say no. And that doesn't put you in any worse position than you were before. Maybe you're out of stamp, or nowadays you're just emailing it anyway. So I would encourage people to do that, to reach out to any organization that they might be interested in learning more about. Especially like if your legal interests coincides with another interest, like say you're interested in law and you're interested in medicine, for example. Well, many large medical providers might have a legal department. Now, maybe they can't accommodate, a high schooler being involved in some giant high-level meeting for confidentiality reasons, but I bet there's a way that maybe they could help you get involved or have you involved or create some sort of internship. So again, I would just encourage you to think outside the box, think about what am I interested in, and then give it a shot and see if that person has some sort of opportunity, or that organization has some sort of opportunity to give to you. Because that'll help you get some exposure and learn earlier rather than too late if you are indeed interested in the legal field, because the law covers everything from, FIFA and like Major League Baseball to, our big, some of our big employers here, which I won't name because I don't want to exclude somebody, but, pretty much everything to your schools. There's legal issues involving schools and the education systems. Those cases come to court all the time. So pretty much anything that you're interested in is going to touch on the law. And I just encourage you to reach out and find whatever kind of internship, externship, volunteer opportunity you can get.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, because, students, especially high schoolers and all of our viewers, just to remind them that you don't get any, like, you have to take the opportunities or try as hard as you can to get those opportunities to expose yourself into the fields, like you were saying, and truly be able to immerse yourself to be able to understand whether or not this truly is a field that you enjoy and that you want to pursue in the future. So that's some great advice. So, kind of just to close off, if you could give one final piece of advice to young women or youth who are interested in leadership, law, or government, what would it be?
Hmm. I think my advice would be to do the scary thing. And by that, I mean, don't make yourself unsafe, okay? But do something that you view as a reach, right? Like I find that oftentimes our biggest obstacle, right, in achieving things can often be ourselves, right? Because you prejudge yourself before you've applied for the school that you want to get into, or the job you want, or the clerkship that you want. That's a law thing, right? You say, oh, well, according to what I know, I don't have the grades for that, or I don't have the extracurriculars for this, or I don't know the right person to secure this position. And I think a lot of times, I mean, myself, I can say the same of myself that gives you a reason to cut back and not even apply or not even take the shot, so to speak. And I think you risk losing out. Now, maybe the majority of the time, it turns out that you're right. You didn't have the grades, you didn't like you had the extracurriculars of the resume and you don't get it. But every once in a while, you're going to surprise yourself because you do have those things. You have a lot of qualifications that maybe you don't recognize because you're very self-critical, right? But that are apparent to everyone else because it's not, no one can be reduced to check boxes on an application. There's always that extrinsic, like extra factor that makes us all individuals. And that's what shines through when you put yourself out there and go for it, so to speak. And I know I've done that in a couple different critical times in my life. And I thought, oh man, I'm never going to get this. But then at the same time, what do I have to lose, right? $2.70 on an application that I sent in that landed me a fantastic opportunity out of law school, right? People had said like, oh, that position is out of your reach. But I said, nah, why not give it a shot? And I got it, right? The same, or even with this job, I could have told myself, oh, I need to have more civil experience before I apply for this position, or, I need to whatever, fill out these parts of my resume. And that doesn't, I don't want to say that my resume might not have been better if I had had those things, but I didn't cut my own legs off, so to speak, before doing the like again, I said the scary thing, the thing that makes you a little bit uncomfortable. You're putting yourself a little bit out there, but I think that's when you really have the chance to grow, to do something new, and um, that oftentimes in those uncomfortable situations, whether you're going on a study abroad program or you're taking a gutsy interview or whatever it is, I think those are where you really grow and expand and where you can create opportunities for yourself, even if you don't get them every single time.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because that's exactly what ActDefy stands for is, you know, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. And a lot of people kind of, including myself, have kind of doubted myself in whatever future career I want to be in because maybe I don't see myself reflected within those fields currently. So I think we encourage a lot of students, high schoolers, no matter young women, minorities, to just pursue that career because, there's always a first for everything. And also you should never limit yourself to just because you don't see people like yourself in those fields doesn't mean that you can't be one person within that field. And so I think it's just very encouraging to hear your advice, and it kind of aligns very similarly with ActDefy's mission and what we stand for here. So yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and share your experiences and insights. We truly appreciate your willingness to speak with our audience and inspire the next generation of leaders and potentially judges. And thank you to everyone who tuned into the episode today. And be sure to follow ActDefy on Instagram and also our website, actify.com, for more conversations like this in the future. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Ellie. Best of
Yeah.
luck.